The forest was quiet except for the sound of insects and the wind brushing against tall trees. A human soldier named Mark was walking slowly, his boots pressing into the wet ground. His rifle was hanging on his shoulder, and his eyes moved carefully left and right. He had been on many patrols before, but this night felt different. The air was heavy, and every shadow looked alive. Suddenly, he stopped. There was a strange sound coming from the deeper part of the forest. It was not an animal sound. It was not the crack of a branch or the call of a bird. It was sharper, like metal striking against stone. A faint clinking, repeated slowly, echoing in the night. Mark narrowed his eyes and whispered to himself, "What the hell is that?" His hand went to his rifle, but he did not raise it yet. He followed the sound, moving carefully so the leaves under his feet would not make too much noise. The clinking grew louder as he walked. At first, he thought it might be some kind of machine left behind by scavengers. Maybe a mining tool, but the sound had a strange rhythm, almost alive. He reached a small clearing where the moonlight broke through the trees. His breath caught in his throat when he saw movement near the edge of the clearing. Someone was there. Mark crouched low behind a bush, trying to see clearly. His heart began to beat faster. It was not a soldier, not a human at all. A slim figure with glowing skin sat on the ground. Long silver hair fell across her shoulders, and her hands were pressed against the dirt. At first, Mark thought she was crying because her body shook slightly. Then he heard the sound again, the metallic clink. He looked harder and felt his body freeze. From beneath her, shining objects dropped onto the ground. Small, glowing stones, each one sparkling in the moonlight like a diamond. Mark's mouth went dry. He blinked, unable to believe his own eyes. The girl was not making the sound with her hands. The jewels were coming out of her body. It was the most bizarre thing he had ever seen. The alien girl gasped as another jewel hit the dirt with a sharp ping. She looked weak, as if each one took her strength away. Mark did not move. His training told him to stay hidden, to observe before acting, but his human curiosity pulled at him. What kind of creature was this? Why was she alone in the forest doing this strange act? One jewel rolled close to his boot. Mark carefully picked it up and turned it in his hand. The glow was warm, like holding a small ember. His heart pounded harder. If this was real, the jewel was priceless. More valuable than gold, more valuable than anything he had ever seen. But he quickly realized the danger. If others knew about this alien, they would hunt her down. They would use her, chain her, and take these jewels until she was dead. Mark's fingers tightened around the jewel. He looked at the girl again. She was breathing heavily, sweat shining on her forehead. Suddenly, her head snapped up. Her eyes, glowing faint blue, locked on him. Mark froze, his hands still holding the jewel. For a second, neither moved. The forest was silent, except for the wind brushing the leaves. Then the girl's expression changed from exhaustion to fear. She pushed herself up, her knees shaking, and stumbled back. "Stay away," her voice rang, sharp and trembling. Her accent was heavy, but her words were clear enough. Mark raised his free hand slowly, showing he meant no harm. "I'm not going to hurt you," he said softly. But the jewel in his other hand betrayed him. Her eyes widened, and she shook her head. "You can't take it. You don't understand," she said, her voice breaking. She looked ready to run, her thin body tense like a cornered animal. Mark wanted to explain, to tell her he was only shocked, that he didn't mean to steal. But before he could, a branch snapped somewhere behind her. Both of them turned their heads sharply. Voices echoed faintly through the trees. Rough, deep voices, speaking a language Mark didn't know. The girl's face turned pale. Her fear grew sharper. She whispered quickly, almost begging, "They are coming. If they see me, if they see you, we both die." Mark felt a chill run through his body. Whoever those voices belonged to, they were close, and they were searching. The alien girl glanced at him one last time, her eyes filled with mistrust and desperation. Then she bolted into the trees, her silver hair flashing in the moonlight. Mark stood frozen for a second, the jewel still glowing in his palm, before his soldier instincts kicked in. He had to follow her. The forest seemed alive now, every sound sharper than before. Branches snapped, footsteps echoed, and the jewel in his hand felt heavier than stone. He shoved it quickly into his pocket and ran after her. His mind was a storm of questions. Who was she? Why did she create jewels? And who were those men hunting her? But one thing was clear. He had just stepped into something far bigger than himself. The strange noise that pulled him here was no accident. It was a call into a dangerous secret. And now, whether he wanted it or not, he was part of it. Mark moved quickly through the trees, his eyes following the faint glow of the girl's hair as it vanished deeper into the forest. He kept his steps quiet, but his heart thundered so loud it felt like the hunters behind them could hear it. The voices grew clearer, harsh and sharp, calling out as if they were tracking a wounded animal. The alien girl stumbled once, clutching her side, then pushed herself forward with sheer will. Mark caught up and whispered, "Stop, you'll collapse." She spun on him, her glowing eyes filled with panic. "You should not be here," she hissed. Her breathing was ragged and her voice cracked with fear. "If they find us, they will not let you live. You saw what I do. Now you are part of it." Mark held his hands up. "I don't care about the jewels. I don't want them. I just need to get you out alive." His words came fast, his voice low but firm. The girl narrowed her eyes, studying him for a moment. Her body trembled as another faint glow shimmered at her side. She winced, turning away, ashamed. A small jewel fell and landed in the dirt with a sharp ping. Mark bent down, covering it quickly with his boot before the hunters could see the light. "They'll follow the glow," he whispered. She glanced at him in shock, surprised that he was protecting her instead of taking it. Her lips parted as if she wanted to say something, but the sound of footsteps cut her short. The trees shook as heavy boots approached. Shadows flickered across the clearing, and beams of pale light from strange devices scanned the forest floor. The girl grabbed Mark's wrist suddenly, her grip surprisingly strong for someone so fragile. "This way," she urged, pulling him toward a hidden path covered in thick vines. They ducked under, crawling through the narrow space as the hunters' voices closed in. They hid behind a fallen log, both of them breathing fast. The hunters passed close by, tall figures with dark armor and weapons that glowed faint red. Mark watched them carefully, noting their sharp helmets and the way their scanning devices swept the ground. They were not amateurs. These men knew exactly what they were searching for. The girl leaned close to Mark, whispering so softly he could barely hear. "They are jewel hunters. My people call them the Hollow. They kill us for what comes from our bodies. If they see you with me, they will cut you open to check if you can make the same." Mark's jaw tightened. His training told him to avoid conflict, to get back to base and report, but his gut told him leaving her meant certain death for her. She looked at him again, her glowing eyes searching for something, doubt, greed, betrayal, but instead she found only determination. "I told you, I don't want your jewels," Mark whispered. He touched the pocket where the first jewel rested, and with a firm motion he dropped it into the mud. It sank into the wet earth, hidden from sight. Her eyes widened. No one in her experience had ever done that. Her lips trembled as if she could not believe what she saw. For the first time she whispered her name. "Lyra." It came out broken, almost afraid, but it was enough. Mark gave a short nod. "Mark." Before they could say more, one of the hunters' devices beeped loudly. A red light swept across the trees, stopping near the log where they hid. Lyra's breath caught in her throat. Mark instinctively pulled her down, pressing her against the ground. The hunter's beam hovered dangerously close, scanning the earth. For a long moment, everything was silent except the hum of the machine. Then the hunter cursed in his language and moved on. Lyra exhaled slowly, her hands still clutching Mark's sleeve. Her body shook with fear, but she did not let go. She whispered in a trembling voice, "You should not stay with me. My curse will kill you too." Mark shook his head. "Not if I can help it." Somewhere in the distance, another jewel pinged faintly, a sound so small but deadly enough to draw every hunter in the forest. Lyra closed her eyes in despair. Mark clenched his jaw, realizing the truth. Protecting her meant fighting an enemy far more dangerous than he imagined. Yet walking away was no longer an option. The night grew darker as clouds rolled over the moon, hiding its light. Mark and Lyra moved carefully through the thick forest, but every step felt like a countdown. The hunters were not far. Their strange red beams kept flashing in the distance, scanning, searching, drawing closer. Lyra's hands shook as she tried to keep her body from releasing another jewel. She bit her lip hard as if forcing herself to hold it in. Mark noticed her struggle and slowed down, whispering, "Save your strength. We'll find a way." Her face turned toward him, pale and tired. "You don't understand. The jewels are not just waste. They are my life. If I stop too long, the pressure builds inside me. If I force it, I die faster." Her voice broke, her words trembling like her body. Mark clenched his fists, hating how helpless he felt. Every instinct told him to protect her, but how could he fight something so unnatural? A sudden shout echoed through the trees. The hunters had found a trace. One of them held a glowing shard of jewel in his armored hand. His deep voice barked orders, and within seconds, 3 more beams of red light swept across the forest floor. Lyra gasped and pressed herself against the nearest tree, fear freezing her body. Mark grabbed her arm firmly. "Move. Now." They ran, branches slapping against their faces, roots twisting beneath their boots. Mark's breath grew heavy, but his mind stayed sharp. He knew they couldn't outrun hunters with tracking gear. They needed a plan. He spotted a narrow ravine ahead where water flowed quietly. Without warning, he pulled Lyra down with him into the cold stream. She let out a soft cry as the icy water touched her skin, but Mark pressed a finger to his lips. "It'll mask our trail." Above them, the hunters' lights flashed closer. One beam passed directly over the ravine, but the water reflected it away. Mark kept his body low, holding Lyra close so her trembling wouldn't give them away. His heart raced as 2 armored hunters stood just above their hiding place, their weapons humming with deadly energy. Lyra's body suddenly jolted, and a faint glow shimmered under the water. A jewel slipped free, sinking slowly into the stream. Mark's eyes widened. He reached out fast, covering the glow with mud in his hand before it could shine. His fingers burned from the heat, but he didn't let go until the glow vanished completely. Lyra looked at him in shock, her lips parting but no words coming out. The hunters moved on, their heavy boots crashing through the brush. Silence returned, broken only by the sound of rushing water. Lyra's body sagged against Mark, too weak to stand on her own. Her voice was a whisper, barely audible. "Why are you doing this? You could take the jewels and be rich beyond your dreams. No human has ever protected one of us. They all want what I carry." Mark's jaw tightened as he met her glowing eyes. "Because you're alive. Because you're not just a thing to be used. I'm a soldier. I don't leave people to die." His words came out low, steady, with a weight that silenced her doubts. Lyra stared at him for a long moment, as if searching for the hidden lie. But all she saw was the truth. Something inside her shifted. For the first time since he had found her, her fear softened, replaced with something unfamiliar. Trust. A distant horn blew through the forest, long and haunting. The hunters had regrouped, and their chase was far from over. Mark pulled himself out of the ravine, offering his hand to Lyra. She took it slowly, her fingers weak but warm against his. Together, they moved deeper into the night, the danger still pressing from every side. Neither of them spoke, but both understood. Their fates were now tied together, and every step forward meant stepping further into a fight neither could escape. Mark led the way through the dense undergrowth, pushing branches aside as Lyra followed, her steps unsteady but determined. The forest seemed endless, each shadow stretching like a threat. Mark stopped suddenly and raised his hand. He heard it again, the faint hum of the hunters' scanners. They were closing in from both sides. His mind worked fast, scanning their surroundings for cover. A hollowed tree trunk lay nearby, half rotten but large enough to hide them. He guided Lyra inside and crouched low beside her, their bodies pressed against the damp wood. Lyra's breathing was uneven, her glowing eyes fixed on the ground as if ashamed. Another jewel slipped from her body, landing softly in the soil. Mark quickly covered it with his boot. "Don't," she whispered harshly. "Touching them could harm you." Mark glanced at her, his voice low but steady. "I'd rather risk that than see you caught." Her gaze locked on him, filled with disbelief. "You don't understand what you are protecting. These jewels are not only rare, they are power. One jewel can buy a fleet, can burn a city, can enslave entire planets. That is why hunters chase us. That is why my kind is dying." Her words were heavy, each one soaked with pain. Mark listened quietly, his jaw tight. She studied his face, searching for greed, but found only stubborn calm. "Why do you help me?" she finally asked. Mark exhaled slowly. "Because I saw you scared, weak, hunted. I've seen soldiers bleed out on battlefields. I've seen civilians cry for help, but I've never seen anyone treated like you. And I can't turn my back." Her lips trembled as if she wanted to argue, but something in his tone silenced her. Still, doubt lingered. She whispered, "What if you change? What if the jewel's glow tempts you like it tempts everyone else?" Mark reached into his pocket and pulled out the first jewel he had picked up. Without hesitation, he pressed it hard against a rock and shattered it. The glowing pieces scattered into the soil like fading embers. Lyra gasped softly, her hand covering her mouth. No one in her life had ever destroyed such a treasure. Her heart pounded as she stared at him, her fear shifting into something deeper. She whispered, "You are either the most foolish man I have met, or the only one worth trusting." Before Mark could reply, the hollow trunk vibrated with footsteps outside. Voices echoed, closer than ever. The hunters had tracked them here. Red beams swept across the trees, cutting through the darkness. Mark placed a finger against Lyra's lips, urging silence. His rifle rested in his other hand, ready. Lyra's hand shook as she gripped his sleeve, her eyes begging him not to fight. The hunters stopped only a few steps away, scanning the ground. One of them crouched, examining the soil near the trunk. His gloved hand brushed dangerously close to the hidden jewel fragments. Mark tightened his grip on his weapon, sweat running down his neck. Lyra held her breath until her chest ached, praying the mud would hide the glow. Finally, the hunter cursed and stood up, signaling the others to move further west. The sound of their boots faded slowly into the distance. Mark lowered his weapon, exhaling relief. Lyra leaned against him, her body trembling. "For the first time," she whispered without fear, "if you stay, they will never stop hunting you too." Mark met her eyes in the dim light. "Then let them hunt. I'm not leaving you." Lyra's throat tightened, her fear slowly melting into something she had never felt for a human before. And in that quiet, hidden place, as danger prowled outside, she began to realize this man might not just be her protector. He might be her only chance at survival. The forest finally opened into a wide stretch of ruins, broken stone pillars rising like bones from the earth. Mark scanned the area, his rifle steady, while Lyra stumbled behind him, her legs weak. Her breath came in short bursts, and her skin glowed faintly in patches, betraying her exhaustion. Mark noticed and stopped. "You can't keep going like this," he said, his voice low but firm. She shook her head quickly. "If I stop, they will find us. The hunters always find us." Before he could answer, a red flare burst into the sky behind them, painting the ruins in crimson light. Lyra's eyes widened with terror. "They've marked us." Mark cursed under his breath and grabbed her hand, pulling her toward a collapsed tower. They slipped inside the broken walls, just as heavy footsteps shook the ground. The hunters arrived faster than Mark expected. Their armor gleamed in the red glow, and their weapons buzzed with deadly energy. They moved with precision, spreading out to surround the ruins. Mark pushed Lyra against the wall, shielding her with his own body. He whispered, "Stay behind me, no matter what happens." But before they could even plan, a hunter's shadow fell across the entrance. His glowing blade cut through the air, and his helmet turned directly toward them. Lyra gasped, and before Mark could react, another jewel slipped from her body, hitting the stone floor with a sharp, echoing ping. The hunter froze. His head snapped toward the sound. Mark acted instantly. He fired a burst from his rifle, striking the hunter's helmet and knocking him back. The ruins erupted with chaos. More hunters rushed in, their weapons slicing through the air. Mark grabbed Lyra's arm and dragged her deeper into the crumbling tower. Stones fell around them as energy blasts tore the walls apart. Lyra stumbled and cried out, clutching her stomach. Her body glowed brighter, several jewels forcing their way out all at once, clattering across the ground. The hunters roared with excitement, their scanners flashing wildly. "No!" Lyra screamed, trying to kick the jewels away, but Mark dove down, scooping them into his jacket. He stuffed them into the rubble, burying their light beneath stone and dust. His hands burned, but he didn't stop. The hunters closed in. One leaped forward, swinging his blade down toward Mark. At the last second, Lyra shoved herself between them, her body glowing fiercely, a shield of light erupting from her skin. The hunter stumbled back, blinded by the sudden burst. Mark seized the chance, slamming the butt of his rifle into the enemy's chest, sending him crashing into a broken pillar. But there were too many. The hunters swarmed like wolves, forcing Mark and Lyra into a corner. His ammo was running low, and her body was failing fast. She looked at him, Her glowing eyes filled with despair. You should leave me. They want me, not you. Run while you still can. Mark shook his head violently. Not happening. His voice cut through the chaos like steel. He fired the last of his rounds, sparks flying as the ruins collapsed around them. The hunters roared in anger, pushing closer. Lyra reached for Mark's hand, her grip weak but desperate. Her lips trembled as she whispered, If they take me alive, they'll use me until nothing is left. Don't let them. Her words struck deep into him. He realized this wasn't just about escape anymore. It was about survival, about defying the greed that hunted her kind. He tightened his grip on her hand. Then we fight, he said. The ruins shook as another explosion lit up the night. Dust and fire filled the air, and in that storm of chaos, Mark and Lyra prepared themselves for the impossible battle ahead. Smoke covered the ruins, and Mark dragged Lyra through a broken passage, his lungs burning from the dust. Behind them, hunters shouted orders, their glowing blades slicing through stone like it was paper. Mark pressed Lyra against the wall, his body shielding her as fragments of rock rained down. Her skin glowed faint and uneven, her energy nearly gone. He touched her face quickly. Stay with me. Don't shut down now. Her eyes fluttered open, and she whispered, I can't. They are too many. Mark's jaw tightened. He scanned the area and spotted a gap leading underground, a staircase half buried in rubble. Without hesitation, he lifted Lyra into his arms and carried her down. The air below was damp and cold, the walls lined with carvings too ancient to read. The sound of water dripped somewhere deep in the tunnels. Lyra stirred weakly, whispering, This place, it is older than both our races. It was built by those who first used the jewels. Her voice faded, but Mark's focus stayed sharp. The hunters did not take long. Their heavy boots echoed above, then down into the stairwell. Their scanners lit up, detecting faint traces of jewel energy. Mark set Lyra down gently and raised his rifle, knowing he had little ammo left. His mind raced. He couldn't fight them all head on. He needed a distraction. Lyra opened her palm slowly, a faint glow shimmering there. A small jewel pushed its way through, rolling into her hand. She held it out to him, her eyes full of fear and determination. Take it. Throw it far. They will follow it. Mark shook his head. That'll weaken you more. But she insisted, her voice breaking. Better me weak than both of us dead. Mark clenched his jaw, then grabbed the jewel. He sprinted down another tunnel and hurled it with all his strength into the dark. A sharp ping echoed, followed by its faint glow. Almost instantly, the hunters roared and rushed toward the sound, their scanners lighting the path. Mark returned to Lyra's side, breathing hard. She looked pale, barely holding herself together, but one hunter remained behind. Smarter than the rest, he scanned the air, then turned his head directly toward them. His blade ignited with a low hum. Mark stepped in front of Lyra, gripping his rifle like a club. The hunter advanced slowly, confident, his armor gleaming red in the faint light. Mark attacked first, swinging the rifle at the hunter's helmet. Sparks flew, but the hunter barely staggered. With a swift motion, the blade slashed across Mark's shoulder, searing pain exploding through him. He gritted his teeth, refusing to fall. He slammed his body against the armored figure, forcing him into the wall. The blade cut across stone, showering sparks everywhere. Lyra cried out, her glowing hands rising weakly. She pressed them against Mark's back, and for a moment, warmth surged through him, his pain dulled, replaced with strength not his own. He gripped the rifle tighter, drove it under the hunter's helmet, and twisted with all his power. The armored figure shuddered, then collapsed. Mark staggered, his blood soaking his sleeve. Lyra pulled her hands away, her own body shaking violently from the energy transfer. "You'll bleed out?" she whispered. Mark leaned against the wall, his voice hoarse but steady. "Not while you still need me." In the silence that followed, both of them realized what had just happened. Their lives were no longer separate. Her energy flowed into him, his strength shielded her, and together they had survived something impossible. But above them, the sound of more hunters echoed down the stairs. The fight was far from over, and their only chance now was to escape deeper into the unknown tunnels. The tunnels twisted endlessly, damp air pressing against their lungs as Mark half-carried Lyra through the dark. His shoulder burned where the hunter's blade had cut him, but he forced himself forward. Lyra leaned weakly against him, her glow flickering like a dying flame. Behind them, the hunters' voices echoed, growing closer, their scanners pulsing with hunger. At last, they stumbled into a vast underground chamber. The ceiling stretched high above, carved with ancient symbols that glowed faintly in the dark. In the center stood a stone altar covered in cracks, and scattered around it were shards of jewels, long drained of their light. Lyra gasped softly, her eyes wide. This is where it began. The first of my kind were broken here. Her voice trembled with both fear and sorrow. Mark set her down gently, scanning the chamber for an escape, but the only way out was the path they had come from. Footsteps thundered closer, their enemies moments away. Lyra's body convulsed, another jewel forcing itself free, glowing brighter than any before. She cried out in pain, the jewel falling and rolling across the stone floor, its light flooding the chamber. The hunters stormed inside, their helmets snapping toward the glow. Their greedy voices rose in triumph. Mark moved instantly, scooping up the jewel and holding it high. The hunters froze, weapons ready. Mark's voice rang across the chamber, hard and fierce. You want it? Then you'll have to take it from me. Lyra's eyes widened. No, destroy it. If they get it, my people are finished. Her voice cracked, desperate. Mark looked down at the jewel in his hand, its light so pure it almost felt alive. He thought of everything, her fear, her shame, the way she trembled every time one of these jewels left her body. He saw not treasure, but a curse. The hunters stepped closer, weapons aimed. Mark raised the jewel higher, Lysak then slammed it down with all his strength against the altar. The chamber shook as it shattered into thousands of glowing fragments. A shockwave of light burst outward, hurling the hunters back against the walls. Their armor cracked, their scanners died, and their weapons fell silent. Lyra shielded her eyes, tears streaming down her face. When the light faded, silence filled the chamber. The hunters lay motionless, their greed turned to ruin. Mark dropped to one knee, exhausted, blood soaking his clothes. Lyra crawled toward him, her hands glowing faint as she pressed them against his wound. Her voice trembled. You gave up everything. For me. Mark met her eyes, his voice low but steady. You're not a curse. You're not a prize. You're a life worth saving. Her breath caught, and for the first time she smiled weakly, tears shining in her glowing eyes. She whispered, Then I will carry your strength as my own. Above them, the ruins groaned as if the earth itself was shifting, but the hunters were gone, their threat broken. Mark rose with Lyra leaning against him, both of them battered but alive. They had no jewels, no riches, only the bond forged in the fire of survival. Together they stepped out of the ancient chamber into the uncertain darkness ahead, knowing the galaxy would never understand what had been lost or what had been saved.